Now, the Colombian president, Ivan Duque, has scrapped a tax reform bill which sparked days of violent unrest across the country. Mr. Duque said his government would work with other parties to produce new proposals. Unions had complained that the bill would have a disproportionate impact on the poorest people, including indigenous groups. Well, Sergio Guzman is the director of Colombia Risk Analysis, a political risk consulting firm. He's joining us live now from Cali in the west of the country. Sergio, thank you very much for making the time. What had Mr. Duque proposed?
Rich, thank you so much for having me. Mr. Duque was proposing tax reform very much based on OECD recommendations that reduce the tax burden on corporations and broaden the tax base with the majority of people. However, at a moment when there's been over a year of lockdowns, more than 16% unemployment and a poverty rate of 42%, that tax reform proposal was dead on arrival.
As we mentioned, there have been days of protests, many of them organised by the unions, stressing that this was going to affect the poor, indigenous groups, but also middle-class Colombians in the wake of the pandemic. What specifically were these groups angry about?
I think there were a lot of things. Before the government introduced the tax reform, it had leaked a couple of proposals that including putting VAT on certain foodstuffs, putting VAT on certain public services and utilities, such as water for high-income individuals. But that didn't sit well with the entire country at a time when there's, like I mentioned, great inequality, a lot of poverty, and the government tried to explain the progressive nature of the reform and the way that it was going to keep subsidies, but the reform wasn't well received politically and it had to move back on it.
So where does Mr. Duque go from here?
Well, I think that that's a really good question because Mr. Duque has 15 months left in his government. He's very much a lame duck at this point because the campaign season has already started. The quest for his successor, which is going to be the election on May 2022, is already underway. And so Mr. Duque either has to make broad alliances with different sorts of parties to see his agenda through until the end of his term. However, because Mr. Duque did try to do precisely that to no avail in November 2019, he has very little credibility. He's going to establish bridges with the opposition.
He said these proposals for now are off the table, but he will be bringing back other measures. Are we expecting further demonstrations?
Absolutely. The demonstrators have already said that they will continue until the finance minister, Alberto Carrasquilla, resigns, until other measures such as the resumption of aerial fumigation with glyphosate, police reform, and even the health reform are off the table. So this is going to be a long-winded opposition.
Sergio Guzman joining us from Cali in Colombia. Thanks very much for being with us.
Have a good day. Thank you.